1. I'm there. Yeah, we're live. All right. I think we have sound. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cult channel. My name is Curtis, the Twitch director here at the Cult channel, and I am the GM for Heartland. And I was so lucky that I was able to, as we say in the Heartland, go fishing. And I was able to catch the creative director of Cult Divinity Lost all the way from Sweden, drug him out of bed in the middle of the night, probably beyond the middle of the night. Peter Nallo, thank you, Peter, for coming out. What time is it there? Welcome to the Cult channel, by the way.
Thank you.
Well, you were here on launch day, so welcome back to the Cult channel.
Yes, thank you. It's 2 o'clock in the evening, or in the night, in the morning, I guess. So yeah, I will have a interesting day tomorrow.
You will have an interesting day tomorrow. Well, I guess it's going to be Saturday for you. So, do you work on Saturdays?
No, but it is fine. I have a meeting at 10, but I was thinking, like, for what do we not sacrifice for cults?
Right. Well, maybe we can crack open the illusion tonight at this hour for you. That would be something good for the fans. Well, welcome back to the Cult channel. We haven't seen you in a while. I'm glad that I got you here before we do Heartland. There was a few different things I wanted to talk about tonight. I want to welcome everybody who is live with us on Twitch. There are a few of you out there. We're going to be live with the Heartland episode shortly after this at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's what time it'll be here when that happens. 8 o'clock here in the central United States where I am. So there was a few things that we wanted to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about Heartland, but we'll save that for the end as we get a little bit closer. But one of the first things that I wanted to get out there, because I will also have this on YouTube, is a little bit of news for the fans, if there's any, about any cult news that you might be able to share, or spoilers, or Kickstarter news, or anything like that. What's going on out there in the cult making book world?
In the cult making book world, a lot of things are going on. Of course, we have the Kickstarter that we launched, and we're working with that to finish the books. So the scenario books, Screams and Whispers, that will be this scenario books. It's very sort of personal horror. We're really going for the sort of personal drama in that one. It's just one scenario that's sort of having the final polish. All the others are being proofread, and we have the art, so they're waiting for layout. But I'm when we were working with scenarios for Cult, I think most of the writers that have written scenarios for Cult realize that they deliver the scenario and it's like good. Right. And then we work it and rewrite it and polish it and rewrite it. And then we have proofreaders that read it and say, like, but what if we would do this? And like, yes, a great idea. And we will so the goal is to sort of have the most perfect, we want to make it really good. But that's moving along very well. And the big sort of book about horror, Beyond Darkness and Madness.
Right.
We're a little bit later on that, a little bit late. I think we might catch up, but everything is written. We are just tweaking some things, and it will be proofread, and the art is done as well. And all the side projects, the cards are ready for to be printed, and the floor plans for labyrinths and secret chambers. We started with 50, and after the Kickstarter we had 100. But Andreas and Fredrik, who worked at it, they have finished the map. So now we're adding text, so each map will have different descriptions how you can use it to inspire the game master. So I think this will be a really cool product. It started as a vague idea, and now it's really cool. So things are clearly moving on the Kickstarter part. We are just very lousy at making updates because it's boring. I mean, it's like I can sit here writing cult stuff or updating scenarios.
Right. I know exactly how that is. Yeah. I really do. Just out of curiosity, because you mentioned the different editing steps that were going on.
Yes.
How many times do you have a certain minimum level of editing steps that a scenario for instance, will go through?
No. I mean, if some scenarios might feel very finished when they are delivered, they are sort of finished in their own right. Other scenarios might be rewritten from the start. I think that the sort of core scenario in the book, which is It Started and Ended with Screams by Matthew Dawkins, the gentleman gamer,
Yeah.
I don't think it's anything like his first draft. His first, like, I've written 10 pages of this, and like, yes, this is cool. What if you do it like this? So now it's like 40 pages, but completely different. But the sort of core ideas are there.
Right.
But that has changed. So it depends a lot. And I don't say it has to do with the sort of skill. I guess it's the skill of the writer, but sometimes you just tweak them and shape them so they function with the rest of the scenarios in the book and the sort of bigger themes. But I think that's a good. I know that some sort of newer writers have been like surprised that, what, isn't it finished now? I just delivered it, and like, yes, but we need to work with the theme. Can we get the theme in better here? Why isn't the player characters more central to the story, and all those things?
Right.
So that's what a lot of things I'm doing. I'm feedbacking scenarios and having a lot of suggestions.
That sounds like fun to me. It's probably work for you after a while. Sometimes fun, but I would imagine.
Yeah, I like it. But it's of course, it takes time.
Maybe until you've read it the 100th time. The Dawkins one, I know he talked a little bit about it during our interviews at the beginning of the Kickstarter, and I was really interested in that scenario, and yeah, we should do that one here on the channel. That would be.
Yeah. I think it's a really intense and creepy and he had touched upon something really, I don't know, when I'm reading it, I'm like, ooh, this is heavy stuff.
He tends to do that.
Yeah,
the Summit was a bit controversial.
Yeah, but and I think it's what, to his credit, this is completely opposite to the Summit in so many ways. This is
right.
Very, very different from the Summit. So I think he is very versatile. But there are also some really cool. One of the most interesting scenarios is actually a scenario that I like all of the scenarios, but Magnus Seter, who wrote scenarios for the second edition of Cult, he has taken one of his old scenarios and updated it and reshaped it, and it's not completely different, but it has sort of changed completely in the way how it feels when you play it.
Right.
So I think to more fit the Divinity Lost perspective. So I think that his Last Hope will also be a really strong scenario.
That one sounded good too. Yeah, we spoke to just about, I think, almost all of the writers from that book at one point.
Yeah, you were diligent.
Yeah, well, Mitchell, he's once he starts talking to people, he's moving to Baltimore, or he would have been here with us tonight. So good luck, Mitchell. He's doing that as well as juggling probably 8 million things. I think he's probably streaming 3 different games right now.
Yeah, his level of energy is amazing. I have to say.
It puts mine to shame, I can promise you that. So that's cool. Those are excited. So you've got the Kickstarter stuff. I'm assuming you guys are working on other stuff way out in the future. Nothing that you can sneak peek us on that, though, huh?
Well, actually, there are a lot of things going on for Cult, but happy to say I would say that we'll of course deliver our first Kickstarter products and that, but there is a lot of we have a back catalog of products that has been finished that is waiting sort of for the next Kickstarter. We're polishing them. We are making art.
Right.
So early in 2021, probably, I'm not promising anything, but we will probably have a Kickstarter, and then it will be the campaign by Nils Hintze, who's written Tales from the Loop, Väsen, and a lot of other role-playing games. He has written a first official campaign for Divinity Lost that will be also very, very different from earlier campaigns and scenarios. So and then we will probably have a soundtrack that, and we will also have like a solo RPG book like that you can play on yourself for Cult. So there are,
Right.
and though these are very close in time, and then we have also really started with the magic books now, diving into them and finding the way how to make it for Cult. So, there's a. I don't think we have the time to talk about all the things right now. We have there is actually another company called Fandrake that will make an art book for Cult together with us with all the art from Cult from 1991 to 2021.
Nice.
And a lot of the look in behind the scenes. So, yeah.
That's good. That's all great stuff. Outstanding. I can't wait.
No, I think it will be. I think there is a lot of exciting things in the future, and there are also a lot of kind of different things that I think will be. I already now, when I'm sort of look at it and read it and write things, I just feel like, oh, this is something that this is new. This sounds, but it feels Cult. So I think
right. Well, speaking of feeling Cult, one of the things that popped up on our radar lately, on mine, it started when, when we were developing the whole Cult channel and everything, and Mitchell was doing a whole bunch of different Cult games, and he was doing his Cult game on Encounter Roleplay. I think he did this with us on one of those promotional one-shots that we did on this channel, and he started doing over on Encounter Roleplay, they have like a donating tipping system, right? So like if you you give them a couple bucks, or I don't know what the levels are, but then you can buy boons or pluses or minuses for either the game master or the players. So anyhow, long story short is, depending on the level, they could go down, and he would end up getting to what he called 2020 mode. So regular Divinity Lost, you're rolling 2d10, and then you add your modifier or subtract. And then I think he took it down to a d8, and then I think there was a d6, and I think the 2020 was actually 2d4. So you're going to be less than a 9 unless you have at least a +2 modifier.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's 20 in many ways.
So I'm thinking, I'm always constantly thinking of different Cult stories, and there are so many of them, and I'm in so many different groups, like on the Discord or in the Facebook groups and things like that, and people are always posting all of these just really fantastic stories. And then sometimes I'll like, because I know Mitch does marketing for Helmgast, and so he's sort of my corporate inroad, so that I'm not like constantly sending you messages all the time, and I'll say, hey, what do you think the Cult people would think about this idea? And he's like, oh, I think they might be working on something like that already. All right, so I'm always thinking about new stuff. And so the question that I wanted to pose to you was 2020, right? It's 2d4 plus, if you have any hope at all, you can tell all of these different things just by opening up the newspapers. Pretty much all over the world, really, right now. There's just so much crazy stuff going on. If someone was to start to create a Cult scenario, let's say just pulled right out of current events, where are some, I don't know, what are some ideas there that you can see?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think there are. Wow. I think that 2020 is I mean, it's kind of a bad year. It is a bad year for a lot of people, and I guess the stories that will spring from 2020 will come some years after. But I think there is big and quite interesting changes when you have like, of course, the whole pandemic.
Right. It's exactly. It's an eventful year. I guess I should say that.
It's an eventful year, but you have the whole pandemic, and then like, what are the consequences? A lot of people are becoming more isolated. It's sort of the part of the old world is dying. Our cinema's dying slowly or quickly right now. And at the same time, you have this the world seems more and more unstable as a whole. You have the pandemic, and then you have like these various, it's like the people, if you have like the principles in cult, and you have like Harab Serap, which is like conflict, it feels like conflict is sort of brewing everywhere, and
Right.
like there is polarization, and like people are torn from each other, and sort of, and then you can see in all countries, the States, here in Europe, everywhere. So it's like the pandemic has a big stress on that, and then you have like the high technology at the same time with deep fake and deep learning in the
Right.
tech companies. So you don't really know what you can trust in the media anymore. I guess it creates this paranoid. Is this just like a deep fake, or is this real? And this strange sensation that I just, that people are starting to live in like these parallel worlds. Like, I have my view of life and my ideology, and I'll sort of live in my world, and we might live in the same city or in the same country or in the same thing, but I'm living sort of parallel with people that might have a completely different outlook on life. And I think that's quite becoming more and more stronger with like old media is dying, and
Right.
all these. So in cult, it's like these stories of isolation, the disease, the illusion within the illusion, in a way that people are sort of creating their own views of the world. I think there is.
Isn't that, to me, that's sort of interesting in sort of just the cult mythos, in that technically, if we were living in the cult mythos, we would be in the illusion as sleepers, right now. So all of these changes would be, it's almost as if we are pulling ourselves not out of the illusion, but further into it. You know what I mean? Separating ourselves and isolating ourselves. And because that's what that's some of the things, the big overarching pandemic that surrounds the whole world, that makes us all basically one. And then over the last, decade, 15 years, everybody, their social groups, while seemingly getting larger, are actually getting smaller and smaller and smaller, just because of ideas and ideals and those sorts of things.
It's very polarizing, and I think that's also a very big difference from the sort of first edition of Cult that we made for Divinity Lost, where when I was like looking at first edition of Cult, of course the illusion there is very much like it's the government, it's the media, it's religion, it's all of these very fundamental things that is the foundation for our society, and we are just trapped within it. But in Divinity Lost, the illusion is also how we are trapping ourselves with like what kind of fake dreams are we building, what allure are we drawn to. So I would say that it's kind of a different change, and I think that 2020 pushes this even further, where we're really creating our own realities and choosing, like, not based on perhaps, I think that the amount of information is so overwhelming that I will go for this view of the world, and this is how I create my story. I think that the best stories of 2020 will come probably 1 or 2 years after, when you have some distance, so you can sort of start to see it, because when you're in the middle of it, it's really hard to then you're sort of in the panic, everything is sort of crumbling, and you're like, what is going on?
So in the cult hierarchy of the Archons and Death Angels, who would you blame? What power would you blame for the pandemic?
Oh,
if you were to point a finger.
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky. I think that I've been thinking about it, and I know there's a lot of theories by others, like I've seen discussions online, but is this like Nahemoth that has like, she's here to the Discord, she is that, because if Malkuth was the conformity, that is the world we know, that's sort of the stability. It's like day after day, the sun goes up, goes down, we go to work. It's like the slow hypnotizing sound of normal life, and you have the tide going in and out, and 1 year passes and you go older. Now I'm at the sort of the storms that wrecks this, the global warming created. So she's sort of the discord, the influence that comes from that. I think that you could claim that the pandemic might be tied to that principle of discord, but at the same time, it feels like this is a pandemic that fueled by so many things. As I think that if you're looking at like Harab Serap and conflict, you can see so many conflicts just appearing like online in the real world. It's something that's almost like something has been festering and now it's sort of just seeped out. It's like a boil that has popped and now it's just seeping out into our reality. So perhaps the influence of the death angels in general that has sort of almost manifested like a pandemic, and it sort of fuels both the exclusion of Satariel and the the new power grab of Thaumiel that sort of burst up. And of course the Archons principles will of course use it as well, but I don't think this is sort of, you can't just point the finger at one.
Right.
This is clearly a conspiracy.
Right. Exactly. It's kind of I've always thought of the Archons they don't work that way. They don't like just, the pandemic, it's the end game. It's like, what happens? What does the pandemic create at the end of it? Right. That's what they're probably more interested in, or maybe the suffering.
Yeah, but I think that the Archons have always been like a force for stability, but like also stagnant stability. I mean, they are not like a force for good in any way, but it's like a stability, like submission, hierarchy, like allure, like keeping this sort of world stable. And since the Archons and the Death Angels really are parallels to each other, and each Archon and each Death Angel is, of course, has its twin or its shadow.
Right.
It's like this pandemic that is right now probably very close to the Death Angels will, in the end, probably result in the need for more stability, and then the Archons will gain more power, and then it will repeat again.
Gotcha.
That's my theory. Yeah.
But there is some, I mean, well, because there's allies and enemies, so there is like some pushing and pulling that goes on, I guess, with that balance of power. But it's always, I would imagine, more like, oh, I think I need to have a little bit more of my stuff on your side to help balance it, sort of attitude, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the Archons are the powers that have been controlling the creation, and the Death Angels have clearly been the sort of those that have been pushed back. But of course, when you have like Kether and Kether fuels hierarchy, there will always be a force to break that hierarchy or sort of, step up in it. And then you have Thaumiel as a sort of counterweight. And if you have community, like the collective that is Bina, you will also have those that are pushed out of it, that doesn't fit. And then you have Satariel. So
it's more of a natural balance that occurs just from the totality of events.
Exactly. But if you have like the Archons would have full control, it would be a very rigid and what would you say, rigid, traditional, probably super conservative existence we would live in. But of course the Death Angels would be total chaos, so I guess it would be and I think that's the key on Cult, of course, that none of those are good, and that is just, we are pulled between these two extremes and think like, oh, we need to pick one side, or we need to find like which power is this we are going to align to, and the real answer is of course none, because we are just trapped.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like the United States right now.
It's the world 2020.
I had a question that I got shot to me earlier. If there's anybody out there in Twitchland watching, before we get to Heartland here in not too long, we're moving right along. But I did get this question earlier, and I thought it was a pretty good question. I think I know just like the book answer, like if you was to give this to me in a test. However, you get the essay version. The fear we as humans carry the fears don't always show in obvious ways, right? That one might think. So how can a game master help to get players invested in the fears of their characters?
Oh, you said you had a book answer to that? I thought it was a really tough and good question.
Oh, good. Well, maybe I've overthought it or underthought it.
Okay, you can give. Let's hear the book answer. What do you think? What would be your book?
The horror contract was what came to my mind. I thought, well, the horror contract is the answer, that you have to go through the steps.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree. I think that is the book version that you say. Let's go to the horror contract and discuss your fears. I think that, and I guess it ties into the horror contract, but I mean, I think that first of all, you really need to have the outset when you're playing a game that we are playing Cult, we are playing this kind of scenario. What kind of scenario will it be? Will you play these broken characters? What kind of broken characters? What kind of story of horror will you invest in? And then to create this, I think it's all about trust, to have the trust in the
Right.
group of players, and it's for the GM and it's for the players to really feel, oh, we are safe here. We are safe in this group. Whatever happens here is sort of, we can discuss it and we won't be judged, and we won't try to terrorize someone else. We will discuss what can we explore. And when you have that mindset that is, let's explore the fear of the characters, then it's sort of more of a process and see, okay, where do I start? Because I think you really want to start with touching on it, and then you want to go deeper and deeper as the story progresses. But I think that the good thing is to have an open discussion with the players between the sessions, and especially in the first session or the session 0, and discuss, okay, what do we want to explore? What do we want to explore? And I think that here we can really, if you have a good group, you can sort of like, okay, you have your artist, you have your artist as a character, and what do we want to explore with this character, and have suggestions. How can we tie this to the story? Because I think that it's especially good if you have the dynamic between the characters. So I'm playing a short campaign right now, where I am playing a very innocent character, but that is very close to a violent character. So that person's violence can't really spill out because it hurts the relationship with my innocent character. So, and the story is about the relationship. But if my character wouldn't have those boundaries, the violent character the story wouldn't be as interesting, because he could just be very violent and do violent things, and it would sort of not reflect that. When it's always those consequences within the group, it creates this wonderful drama. So I would say, talk with the group and explore it and feel safe. Feel that, oh, we can be safe. We can do this. We can. Sorry, I guess I'm rambling, but I think
that's good.
Otherwise, it's the book answer.
Right. No, that's good. That's some great insight. I really appreciate that. I was already mentally fitting pieces of it into my own games. Chaotic Story in chat says, I like the idea of luring the players towards their fears and coaxing them forward into the darkness. Yeah, I try. I'm running into sometimes, since now that my players have gotten a little familiar with Cult, they are a little tougher, or sort of act a little tougher, right? And so I find myself in situations where I need to smack them down a little bit. Only because, and I guess that's my segue as we go into this little last part before I let you get out of here, and that is Heartland, which is coming up next, which is one that it's a story we've taken a couple of shots at earlier. We did like our first season, which ended up being, I think, around 10-ish episodes or so. And then we attempted a second season during a different time slot and with different people. And as with all tabletop role-playing games, getting a game that can stick for a period of time is always a challenge, no matter what, just because of life and schedules and all that kind of stuff. So when the Friday Night Crew was done with the last campaign that we did, we thought, let's revisit the Heartland story. Only this time we decided to really slow it down. They're all sleepers. They kind of have archetypes picked out and stuff, but it's almost, I mean, there's stuff for them to discover and kind of like that, but we're really drawing it out in this episodic thing. We've got a handful of characters, but we only have 3 or 4 different characters each night, so they never know who's playing from week to week to week. So it may be somebody else coming up the next week. So there's like little side stories and vignettes and all sorts of stuff happening and building all on this world of Heartland, which is Providence, out in the middle of nowhere, somewhere between Missouri and Kansas, right on the border. A small town that it maybe has 200 or 300 people in it.
Oh, that's
surrounded by farmlands, and in this day and age, most of those farms are either now very large family farms or semi-corporate farms or just full-blown corporate farms. So you've got sort of that that pressure coming in on this small town, and the small town is dying. It's only surviving because it's because of its location central to 2 bigger cities, right? Out in this dying rural area, anyhow. So there's been a challenge. We haven't really dug, or we're a few episodes in, but we're the episode number is not important to us. It's just kind of developing these 2 stories, and there's 2 main characters. One of them is Daisy. She's a war vet, sort of a woman in her 60s, back from the first Gulf War. And then Sabella, who is 20-something, and her parents died in a fire, and she has inherited the family bookstore. So she has books, and it's sort of like this, the mystical book section right inside. But because it's in the Midwest, a very conservative area, the local church plays a big role. There's a local pastor. There's one of the characters is a law enforcement, one of the sheriffs that patrols, a county sheriff's deputy that patrols the area.
It sounds like, this world that I would want to visit. I mean, from a story perspective, I really like that kind of setting, even if it's not in the sort of same part of the United States. It feels, I get the feeling of the first season of True Detective,
right?
And like perhaps some Twin Peaks ish. I mean, because I am myself from a small town far north in Sweden, or small village, so this sort of not isolated, but sort of small town horror is very close to my heart.
Isolation is one of the major themes. Grief, those sort of things, they all sort of have sort of this broken family background, plus just the whole deterioration and, well, even just the overarching theme, and it's been an American theme for a long time, is just the slow dying of all of these small towns as the large metropolises, to use a cultish pun, grow bigger and bigger and bigger. But most people out there who play Cult always sort of think of it as more urban than, I'm starting to think, we're taking more of the folk horror approach, where the local church, but no real big, huge villains. that anybody knows of per se. You know, there's lots of little small interests that are in the area. Much, well, I guess it's like you might find in any cult scenario, I suppose, if you were dealing with, you know, like some sort of politics where you have power struggles and things that were happening. Have you ever done any sort of folklore-ish rural interpretations of cult before? I mean, I've never seen any published, but I don't know if you've ever like ran one of your own.
Yeah, I have. I think that, first of all, I really think that the small town horror works very well, and I know that classic cult has been very like city focused. It is based on cities, just to get away, I think, also from Call of Cthulhu, and all those more like let's go out into the wilderness. But I think that especially for Divinity Lost, that sure the cities are a big part because they are the sources of power. But I think that the countryside and the more rural areas have clearly things of interest, and you will see that in the upcoming scenario book as well. And I think it was also there where we said like, okay, we will have like Island of the Dead in the Taroticum and other tales, with like survival horror on a tropical island, because that feels very uncult. Can we do it? And Robin like, yes, I have this idea. So I think I have played. I'm actually the scenario I'm playing right now is with Robin as a game master, and I don't think I should mention his name because he might want to be anonymous. We haven't sort of because he is actually writing a book about sort of a setting set in the United States, a small town, not 200 people, but like one of the smaller towns. And he lives in a small town. He has sort of comes from a conservative family. So there's a lot of sort of his experiences, and we were playing in that setting, this sort of dying town that now has a breath of hope with like an investment called the Excelsior Project. But there is a lot of secrets. I think that the whole idea with like the small town is there are secrets everywhere. There are like hidden secrets from the past and family secrets. And I also played for some reason when I play small town horror, I always have them set in the United States. I think I've watched so many horror movies like read Stephen King stories. So for me, it's like small town United States feels like, yes, this is a perfect place for horror.
Because they're creepy. I grew up in a small town.
Yeah, but I think especially when you sort of from an outsider perspective, when you're like, some people are strange and prejudiced, and like, what does the sheriff do in his office at night? It's like, I mean, Stranger Things is sort of also the small town horror,
right?
So I really think that setting has clearly something to offer, and as you mentioned really well with Heartland, is sort of, you know, the decaying small town, how sort of the farms are getting more industrialized, sort of the thing that sort of made small towns or small town America or the small towns around the world like that, you know, there are people that work the lands, they're very close to nature, that is sort of disappearing. You have like these big, perhaps you have some industries, and you have like the Target, and you have some motel, and then you have like these industrialized farms really. Perhaps you have a prison that can sort of support, you know, the population with working there. And so you have sort of the very idea of what it means to live and be in a small town is also dying in a way that like, if you can be close to nature, but you probably not work with the logging industry, you're not working with the coal mines anymore, it's something else. And with that and people leaving, so like when the kids grow up, they're like, we take the fastest way out of here to either coast or and I think that sort of sense of decay together with broken families and homes and secrets is like this perfect brewing ground for stories. So I really like that setting. I think, and in a way, I think it's easier than the playing in big cities. I think that these big cities is, in a way more challenging because they are sort of bigger, and in a small town you can very sort of, you go out to the farm,
right,
and when you're at the farm you're sort of isolated. It's
right.
like several miles to the next house. It's like, oh damn.
Yeah, that in and of itself adds to the fear of it. Yeah, that's one of the things that we've been adding to it lately, is building on all of the different stories that are going on. Because there's a limited number of people, we can really expand on, and even though they might not play part of the plot, you know, we just kind of throw them in for flavor. Like there was the hoarder that we talked about last week, that, you know, their family history, and they used to be wealthy and had this big house, and then generationally it just gets, you know, more and more deteriorated, and all of their stuff accumulate until there's just horrible, terrible things that are found there when the cleanup company finally comes to scrape it out.
But what I like with that is that you are using a small town to, you are actually building a world with all these stories, with all these characters that you can place there. And so after a while it will be like, oh, we have the Heartland setting, and there will be so many stories and places established. Like you can sort of almost creating a whole small universe with.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty interesting. All of the different little locales. The local cafe is also the bait shop where people get their fishing bait. And of course, there's a church, and the post office sits on the state line, so it handles mail for the town, half in Kansas, half in Missouri. So it handles mail for two different zip codes. It's all sorts of weird, little twisty, crazy, oddball things that are there. It's pretty neat. I appreciate you, Petter, for coming out and visiting with us tonight, or early in the morning. I hope I don't wreck your day too bad tomorrow.
Well,
today.
Cult is about suffering in a way, so it's no problem.
Right. It's 2D4 for you tonight, Mr.
Yes, 2D4 for my sleeping hours tonight. Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I really do. Thank you so much for coming out and talking to us. If you're out there, we are going to cut away for just a little bit, so I can say goodbye to Petter and say hello to the cast of Heartland, who are gathering for that one, which is going to be next. So hang tight, and we will be right back.